On-farm trials are a great way to evaluate soil amelioration practices on your own farm. They help you understand how the research can be applied on your own farm, on your own conditions and in your own soils. The key to a good on-farm trial is keeping it simple, which means just evaluating 1 or 2 treatments at a time. It's a good thing to get out your yield maps and have a look and see where those soil type zones are, and then set up your treatments. So ideally treatments should be 2 to 3 widths of the header, and this is particularly important if your machinery's widths don't match. However, if you're in a controlled traffic farming situation where all your machinery widths match, this is much simpler and easier. The length of the treatments should be about 100 metres at least, and this allows the technologies that you're using, such as yield mapping, or if you're applying inputs using variable rate, to have a chance to get going and collect enough data. Once you've set up your treatment widths and applied your inputs, you can then use yield mapping technology to actually measure the yield of the trial. And this saves a lot of messing around with weigh trailers and enables you to harvest the trial without having to stop. Key thing to remember when you're using yield mapping technologies is to make sure that before you harvest the trial, you actually check that the yield monitoring system's working and the data's logging, that you calibrate your headers. And where possible, just use one header to harvest the trial and try and harvest in the same direction, because the actual yield amount that the sensor records can change depending whether you're going uphill or downhill in the speed of the header. The other key thing that can go wrong when you're using trials, particularly if you've used the GPS to set up your run lines and you've counted how many run lines, it's a really good idea to actually manually put a mark on the edge of the fence, so just in case you lose the coordinates or something happens and you're able to find where you applied your treatments. It's a good idea when you get to the end of the treatments to actually have a look at the yield monitor and just record the actual yield value at the end of each strip, because you'd be surprised how many times people get to the end when they download their data and it hasn't worked. So this is just a good insurance policy. You can also use other sensors and information to help understand and interpret your trial on top of your data. And this is where things like satellite imagery that's converted to NDVI can be really helpful, because it allows you to take a snapshot of how the crop's growing during the season, and you can then compare it to yield. So sometimes in trials and soil amelioration trials, it might help understand if the crop grew good biomass and then you had a poor yield at the end. So precision agriculture technologies can be really useful to help you implement on-farm trials, testing out new soil management practices before you apply them across the whole farm. But remember, keep it simple.